Hello, welcome to Water Quality Wednesday. I'm going to give just one more minute, make sure that I have everything and that you can hear me. And then we're going to start a PSA, video PSA that was made possible by the department or the Division of Boating and Waterways and County of Lake here in a minute, and then we'll get started with the presentation. So we'll go ahead and start that PSA, and then we'll get started with Water Quality Wednesday. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Welcome to Lake County, home of California's largest natural freshwater lake, Clear Lake.
Originally called Hobbiton, meaning big water in native Pomo, Clear Lake is one of the oldest lakes in North America.
Clear Lake has over 120 miles of shoreline with shallow and rich waters that makes it a world-class fishing destination.
The productive waters of Clear Lake have produced record-catching fish, which contributes to the average 15,000 boaters that visit Clear Lake every year.
Clear Lake is currently free of invasive quagga and zebra mussels.
Monthly monitoring by Lake County's Water Resources staff help to maintain Clear Lake's mussel-free status.
If invasive quagga or zebra mussels are introduced into Clear Lake, their devastating impacts will last forever.
Mussels consume massive amounts of green algae when they filter feed lake water,
which will decimate the sport fishing population, as green algae is the base of the food web in Clear Lake. Mussels can attach to and clog drinking water pipes,
causing millions of dollars to the public and private sector to pay for needed maintenance and removal.
For the drinking water systems on the lake, this is especially concerning as Clear Lake provides drinking water to about 66% of the county's population.
Added cost to remove mussels would make drinking water treatment more difficult and expensive.
There are no examples of successful eradication of invasive mussels from lakes, meaning if quagga or zebra mussels are introduced into Clear Lake,
they will be here forever, and the Clear Lake as we know it today will never be the same again.
There are 3 simple things we can do to prevent the introduction of invasive mussels.
Before leaving any water body, remember to clean your boat inside and out, and all compartments. Remove any plants, dirt, or sand.
Drain your engine, pull your drain plug, and empty any water from ballast tanks or live wells.
Dry your boat, including inside compartments, and make sure all equipment, including water toys and fishing gear, are completely dry before visiting another water body. Every boat launching in Lake County needs to be screened and stickered.
Find participating screeners and sticker sellers online at www.nomussels.com.
When visiting a sticker seller, the boater will fill out a single-page screener form. The screener will verify that the boat is safe to launch in Lake County
and does not have mussels or has not recently been in a mussel-infested lake.
If a boat is high risk or likely to have mussels, an inspection is needed, and the vendor will call a certified watercraft inspector from the county,
and they will perform an inspection on the boat for free.
Once a boat passes screening and/or inspection, boaters will purchase a sticker for $20.
The County of Lake Quagga mussel stickers are located next to the yearly California state sticker, which will be adhered to both sides of the bow, next to the registration numbers and the state's mussel fee sticker, as well as at the back of the trailer. Please report any violators without current quagga mussel stickers.
Even screen boats will sometimes be stopped at the ramps by ramp monitors for quality assurance.
Sometimes, mussel sniffing dogs will also be present at the ramps to conduct impromptu inspections.
This step won't take long, but it's important so that we can continue to protect Clear Lake from invasive mussels.
If you have any other questions, or you think you see a quagga or zebra mussel in Clear Lake or in another water body in Lake County,
you can call us at Water Resources at 707-263-2344.
you can send us an email at water.resources@lakecountyca.gov.
Or you can send us a message on Facebook. Find us at Lake County Water.
Thanks for helping us keep Clear Lake clear of invasive mussels.
And with your help, we can protect and preserve Clear Lake for future generations of people, plants, and animals.
Thanks to our funding partners at the California State Parks Division of Boating and Waterways for supporting this program and PSA.
Thank you, Sam, for playing that video. Welcome to Water Quality Wednesday. My name is Angela De Palma Dow. I am Invasive Species Program Coordinator for the County of Lake Water Resource Department and the Watershed Protection District. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to learn about invasive mussels, particularly quagga and zebra mussels. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We really appreciate the staff tonight from admin, Sam Houston, Matthew Rothstein for staying the night and helping us with all of our technology, making this possible, and of course our guest speakers today. I'll introduce them in a few minutes here. So this is going out on the Mediacom Channel 8, local PEG TV. It's also going out on our streaming on our Facebook on the County of Lake page, and it'll be also here on Zoom, and then we'll have recordings that we'll share on our Facebook here after tonight's event. It's being recorded. So a little intro today. We're going to be, again, talking about quagga zebra mussels and some reminders if you're in Zoom. We will have a question answer at the end. You guys can also put in your questions at the Facebook comments and we'll make sure and get to them. I'm checking those and respond to them. And then the meeting is being recorded and will be posted on these sites. We also have an evaluation. This will be provided in the chat box. So we learn what we did right, what we did wrong, how we can improve. We're also looking for topics for future Water Quality Wednesdays. And I will also put that in the comments for the Facebook. So Water Quality Wednesday are all about open, accessible forums to share information because there's a lot going on out there in the lake right now. There's a lot of great programs and great partners and agencies doing work. We want to make sure that we provide a forum for learning about everything that's out there. We really want to demystify lake and water science, particularly looking at the people, places, the programs and projects, again, that are going on the lake that are really helping to improve our ecosystem and our water quality. Because we all play a part in protecting all of these valuable aquatic systems. And we want to take a moment and acknowledge the Indigenous original caretakers of Clear Lake, Pomo, and we just really want to point out that Clear Lake ecosystem is very important and has been here for traditional cultural uses for the Pomo. And recently there's been topics about the Clear Lake hitch. And you'll learn today that if we get an introduction of invasive mussels, they're going to have impacts not just for infrastructure and sport fishing, but also for native fish and native ecosystems. And it kind of all ties in together. So just wanted to acknowledge Pomo and put in a shout out here for the hitch and how this all ties together. So currently Clear Lake does not have mussels. So we're not doing a response right now. We do actively monitor for mussels and we have a very active funded prevention program. You might see some of these signs out around the county. What we just saw from the PSA that was shown earlier, we have a screening inspection program, and then any boats that come in with mussels or might have mussels get fully decontaminated. So we make sure we're not introducing those mussels into the lake. However, today's presentation is going to be about, in case we do get mussels, we want to be proactive in that management. However, the full focus right now of our efforts is still on prevention. That's because prevention is easier, effective, and more affordable. And you get a bigger bang for your buck with prevention. But we do want to be ready in case anything happens and we discover mussels. And I just want to reiterate that this project is made possible by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service by a grant. And so we really appreciate them as funding partners on this project. So here's our speakers. I'll introduce them and then I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and they can take it over. So Lisa and Leah, I'm so glad that you guys are here today. So Lisa is the president at Creative Resources Strategies. And you've been the president for 20 years. That's a long time. You know what you're doing. And then Leah is the president of Conservation Collaborations. and she's the executive director at the Invasive Species Action Network. So we have some heavy hitters here, full of experience, and I'm really excited for these speakers to be here today to talk about our plan for if we get mussels in Clear Lake. And I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you guys. We can make sure that your screen is visible here, and welcome. And I know some of you guys aren't here in California time, so I really appreciate you spending the evening with us and teaching us here about Clear Lake and what we'll do if we get mussels and how we're planning a response. So take it away, Lisa.
All right. Hey, thanks, Angela. And thanks to everybody for being here tonight and taking time out of your busy schedules. As Angela indicated, we are going to be talking about a Clear Lake Rapid Response Containment and Transition Plan. Much effort needs to be placed on prevention, and a portion of this plan does deal with the prevention aspect. And equally important, if there is an introduction or a detection of quagga or zebra mussels, we want to have plans in place to address that as quickly as possible. So the who, what, and why County of Lake Water Resources was the impetus for this program, Lake County Water Resources Department. And our goal is to develop this containment and transition plan, not only to protect Clear Lake, but to protect all of Lake County and all of Northern California. And it's to protect the economic, recreational, natural resource, and societal values of Clear Lake. It has been demonstrated in lakes all around the United States that when these quagga and zebra mussels are introduced, there are significant economic, recreational, natural resource, and cultural values that are lost upon their introduction. And as was mentioned in the video that you saw earlier, there has not been a full eradication effort possible. So it's really important that these prevention programs are effective and that everybody is aware of what these mussels can do. So what we're really trying to do is improve the preparedness capabilities of Lake County to protect the county water resources in the event that these mussels are introduced. The plan provides guidance to plan partners and all of those entities that manage water bodies in all of Lake County to efficiently and effectively respond to an introduction. So if we do get an introduction in Clear Lake or in Lake County, we want to keep it contained to the best of our ability. But what we really want people to understand is the effects of these invasive mussels. And they have numerous effects, and people really can't get their hands around it until those effects are actually realized when these species are introduced. But invasive mussels are ecosystem engineers. In other words, they can enter an ecosystem and completely alter how that ecosystem functions. They can and have contributed to the local extinction of native mussels. They completely alter the structure of food webs, and food webs are critically important in any lake system. It's how species feed off of one another, interact with one another. They cause the collapse of sport fisheries, which would be incredibly important to Clear Lake. They contribute to harmful algal blooms, which contributes to declines in water quality, and Clear Lake has experienced some harmful algal blooms. They do contribute to declines in fish populations, and they contribute to this very technical term called benthification. In very basic terms, Clear Lake generally has a cloudy kind of look to it. Even though it's called Clear Lake, there's a little bit of a cloudiness to it. And that's because there's a lot of activity happening in the food web in the water column. When you introduce a species like a quagga or zebra mussel, it usually attaches to the bottom in substrate. And what it does is it causes the entire system of the lake to focus all of its productivity on the bottom of the lake. It does result in an increase in water clarity, and a lot of people think that's actually a good thing, but it's not, because that's not how lakes function. And so when you take all of the productivity that's happening in a water body and you push it to the bottom of the lake, it causes significant issues in that lake, such as extinction of native mussels, collapse of sport fisheries, and harmful algal blooms. And the one takeaway message that we hope everyone understands tonight is that when this happens, when we do get these introduction of mussels, most costs are borne at the municipality level, and they are paid by the consumer that uses that water. There's also economic effects that a lot of people don't realize. So when we get these invasive quagga and zebra mussels, they get into raw water delivery systems. That means they get into the pipes that deliver water to Clear Lake and a lot of places in the county, and also into well systems for people that draw water for their wells. So there's a lot of cost to manage these invasive mussels at those water delivery systems. There's also cost to remove mussels on a repeated basis from boat launch infrastructure. So if these mussels were to get into the lake, they would encrust all of the docks in boat launches. And even if you were to get all of those mussels off of those boat launches and docks, they would just immediately re-inhabit those boat launches and docks. So it's just a continual maintenance issue. It has also contributed to reduced tourism. Montana estimated that if there were introductions of quagga zebra mussels in some of their lakes, it would result in a 2 to 10% reduction in tourism dollars. And the one thing that many people do not understand is it will reduce property values for people living along the lake's edge. It's been documented in places such as Vermont, where there's been a 16% reduction in property values, and Washington estimates as much as 19%. And then there's just the average cost to people that own boats, to decontaminate your boats on a regular basis and to maintain those boats. Because even if your boat were only to be used in Clear Lake and you never took it to another water body, you would have to continually decontaminate it, or it would be encrusted in your bilge pumps on the outside of your boat with mussels. And again, most costs are borne at the municipality level, and they are paid by the consumer. And then the other effect that we wanted to talk about was the social effects. This will result in less recreational boating because it's going to affect the fisheries. It will cause loss of license revenue. Boating licenses, boat stickers, support the prevention program, supports all of the things that Lake County does to ensure that you have good water quality and good recreational fisheries. It will result in fewer recreational fishing opportunities. It's very likely Clear Lake would not be known as one of the top bass lakes in the country. It will affect drinking water quality. When these mussels get into the systems, it affects the taste and odor of the water. Now, there are things that you can do as water managers and water delivery people to improve the taste of that water. But it causes extra cost, expense, and chemicals that have to be added to the water. And it's just generally reduced aesthetics. When these species have been detected and have populated other lakes in the country, the shoreline gets covered with these razor sharp mussel shells, which makes it really difficult for people to walk their dogs, that sort of thing. And it just creates really reduced aesthetics. So we've tried to characterize some of those changes that would likely occur from an invasive mussel invasion in Clear Lake. Again, disrupted food chain, reduction in property values, increased cost for maintenance, beaches and shorelines with sharp shells, loss of revenue to Lake County communities, a significantly increased cost to maintain clogged, fouled, or contaminated water delivery infrastructure, restrictions on fishing, tournament, and boating, and encrusted boats and engines that are very costly to maintain. So we have this project, and this project is aimed at helping Clear Lake and Lake County prepare for an introduction and hopefully prevent an introduction, and then potentially address that introduction should you have one. And so what we've done is we're developing this plan that looks at all of the different aspects of prevention through introduction to containment and potential control actions. And we're working with other state agencies and federal agencies that would be involved in those potential response actions. We're also planning an exercise that will occur in June, likely in the Lakeport area, to bring in a lot of folks that manage water in and around Lake County to help understand how the county would respond to an introduction. So we've got the plan, the exercise. We're also looking at a decontamination station feasibility analysis. So what we're doing is working with Lake County Water Resources staff to site potential decontamination stations that are permanent decon stations located at different sites, strategically located throughout the lake, that will allow people to decontaminate their boats prior to launching and post-launching. Now, prior to launching would be before you have an introduction, if it was possible for you to get those decon stations before an introduction. And then if you were to get an introduction and establishment of quagga and zebra mussels, these decon stations would be used to decontaminate vessels or watercraft as they leave the lake. We're also working with the National Sea Grant Law Center, who we worked with several years ago in Lake County, to really look at your regulations and ordinances to see if there's any enhancements that could be made to those that would better protect Lake County, A, from an introduction, and B, with addressing that introduction should one should invasive mussels become established. And the other piece of our project deliverables are a series of webinars, such as tonight, and presentations. So the goals of our project are really to look at the planning aspects of what Lake County has been doing in terms of planning to prevent an introduction, what types of public information that we can make available to raise that awareness, and should there be an introduction, a strong communications plan to let everybody in the county know that there has been an introduction and what key next steps need to be taken. So there's a lot of operational coordination aspects to this project. The project also involves screening, search, and detection protocols, as well as risk management, and then ultimately response. So when we look at our plan outline, there's some background about why Clear Lake is so susceptible to an introduction of quagga and zebra mussels. You have excellent water quality characteristics that make you at extremely high risk for an introduction. You have a lot of boating activity from outside the county, which makes you at extremely high risk for an introduction. The good news, though, on that latter piece is that most boat owners that participate in bass fishing tournaments throughout the country are very well aware of quagga and zebra mussels. They also own watercraft that are worth a lot of money, and so they do a great job at decontaminating their vessels and doing clean, drain, dry protocols when they move from lake to lake. Still, boating tournaments are a high risk factor. And Clear Lake is at high risk because of that. You also have seaplane gatherings at your lake, which is another key vector or pathway for introduction. The plan also talks about legal authorities, your current statutes, and the roles that all of the different jurisdictions play in Lake County. And then a key part of the plan is your rapid response strategy. So what can you do if you do get a detection? What if somebody does find a mussel attached to a dock? So we've got mechanisms of response. We've got an incident command structure. It's very similar to the incident command structure that's used when there's a wildfire, although we've modified it for quagga and zebra mussels and are using it in several places in the United States. There's a communication component and a response action component. A really key part of this plan is transition to containment, because if you do get an introduction and quagga and zebra mussels do become established in the lake, there's things that you can do to ensure your continued use of the lake. And so we want to make sure that those things are well understood, how you can contain those mussels to the lake and still have people enjoy the lake as is. And so that involves outreach materials, potential amendments to ordinances, what kind of training would be needed to transition county staff from prevention to containment, what types of impacts would be experienced by water purveyors. And that includes not only municipal water purveyors, but people that live along the lake that draw water from the lake for their well systems, and then any potential mitigation solutions. I've already talked about the decon station feasibility analysis. And another key component of the plan are some long-term management recommendations. But we're not going to leave Lake County stranded in terms of, okay, these are the 15 things you need to do. And by the way, good luck, go find funding to do that. We're working hard really now to identify some potential funding sources to where some of these can be put in place prior to an introduction. And I mentioned one of those, potentially the permanent decontamination stations. If we can get those sited before we even have an introduction, that will help with prevention efforts greatly, and it will be very beneficial and cause no disruption of services or less disruption of services when you do have a potential introduction. So, will this plan be effective? Testing the capabilities of any plan is critical to success. Leah and I do not develop plans that sit on shelves. They're plans that are active in living and breathing, that counties and other entities can use long term. So an example of testing the capabilities of the plan is to look at, for example, the public information component. So the objective in the plan is to deliver coordinated, prompt, reliable, and actionable information to the whole community using clear, consistent, accessible, and culturally appropriate methods. So in other words, if we were to get an introduction, we want to get the word out fast with good information to all of the different audiences so that everybody understands what's happening. And so to test that during the exercise that we have in June, we're going to test that capability target by saying, okay, within 1 week of a dracynid detection, X, Y, and Z should happen. This is who needs to do it. These are the outreach materials. And so we're developing all of those as part of the plan. Another example of a capability target is 1 month prior to taking an action to attempt to eradicate or limit the spread of dracynids, a whole series of actions are going to need to happen. And everybody needs to understand what those actions are, who's going to do them, and what time frame using what resources. So that's the way we test a plan. It's not just, here's a plan and this is what's going to happen. It's really disciplined and very linear. And so, Leah, I think I now turn it over to you to talk about the rapid response strategy, correct?
I believe that is correct, yes. Hello, everybody. Let's see, just trying to make sure our view. Okay, great. So thank you, Lisa. Fantastic. So what I'm going to do is provide a little bit more detail of how the plan kind of transitions into what we see at an exercise, and just give you a little bit more detail so you can understand really what this planning process looks like, and typically for, a dracynid rapid response exercise. So these major bullets that I have here, I'm just going to walk through each of these to give you an idea of what might happen. And so essentially, though, when we gather all stakeholders together to discuss and plan what a response would look like, there's several methodical steps you would go to. And just like anything, when you're planning, whether it's a wedding or a dinner party, you put together a plan to make sure it goes smoothly. This is the exact same thing. You put together a plan, we go through the steps to make sure, have we identified all these areas that we're going to need to communicate and respond adequately? And if not, we can flag those and then come back and improve upon it. So starting with confirmation of detection. So if there was a detection of mussels, we better be darn sure that those really are zebra or quagga mussels. So understanding what that process is, how long that takes, who needs to know, and what, the information in terms of confirmation. And then also too, who are the suite of individuals that we can call on to also confirm that detection. So making sure we have people at the ready. So folks that can come and, do identifications at a drop of a hat. Next is declaration of emergency. It's really important to put this into a context where, the magnitude of what's been discovered is truly important. So sometimes a declaration of emergency is really important to use. An example here that will resonate with all of us is certainly thinking about the COVID pandemic. Different jurisdictions, certainly the governor of California had declared an emergency related to COVID. This allowed funding to be made available. It really elevated, certainly at the beginning, of really how important this event was. And the same is true for Jacinid. So if there was a declaration of emergency at a county level, that could just be really, a trigger for everyone to understand the relative importance of what was going on and potentially mobilize funds. Notification of communication. Lisa certainly touched on this, of how the importance of this would roll out to a variety of stakeholders. But in those beginning phases, of course, there will be kind of key communication points that would happen all the way up to the potentially the governor, but then also neighboring states, and letting others know that this water body is now, affected by Jasinids. So next, delineation of the scope of response. So, all these first couple of bullets, they kind of happen simultaneously and can happen rather quickly, if you will. But the delineation of that scope, once there's a confirmation of the detection, then it's really important to get out on the ground and look, really, is this a one-off? Do we just have one single mussel that's attached to a dock at someone's near their water or near their property, or is this really a larger infestation that's throughout the lake? So, making sure that's very clear at the outset of what's going on is going to be really important to do. And this could take a variety of resources. We might need dogs sniffing out on shorelines. We could need scuba divers going out and looking. It could be really intense sampling that's going on. So the delineation of what's occurring in the water body is, a very lots of information gathering going on. So activating the incident command system. Again, Lisa mentioned this, and the incident command system, it is used in all kinds of emergencies, whether it's a hurricane, a wildfire, or whatever, and it's really just a system that is used. We have a central point person that's calling all the shots and communicating to all the different teams that are working on coming up with response solutions. So it's really just a great way of organizing, but it's a common way of organizing. So it can be activated, if you will, during a response, depending on how big the situation is. And then activating all kinds of communication. So I talked about some of those, like early on, we've got an issue here, but then active communications would really include any of the stakeholders. So, folks that live and recreate on the water, business owners, nearby counties that are also managing other water bodies. So the full suite of communications of what the county is doing and how they're responding to the situation at hand. And then this next bullet here, the response actions. So really, once we kind of get into this full response phase, we probably would break out into, different groups that would huddle up and say, okay, what are our prevention strategies going to be? What kind of control techniques, if we have a controllable situation, could we put chemicals in the water? Do we want to put barriers up? What are the things that we could do? Containment. Again, what are the steps that could be taken? Is it a temporary closure of the water body to assess the situation for very short term and then pop up mandatory decontamination? So what are those things? And then monitoring. So keeping an eye on really, do we have a sense of really, is this situation bigger than it seems at this time, and also nearby water sources? So really this full suite of what are the potential responses. So this is just kind of putting the pieces together to allow then to take the full steps. And it's really who's going to do that, what kind of funding it would take, what kind of resources we would need to really put this all together and move on things. So finally, at the close of a response, it is important to then step down or terminate the incident command system. So once, you know, a situation would be that it's more of, okay, we're in sort of long-term management situation, you would want to step down that emergency response kind of setup and infrastructure. So next slide, Lisa. So taking all those pieces that I just went through sort of very briefly, spending time on site during the exercise that will take place in June is the goal. So that's really getting very clear at each of those bullet points that I mentioned. You know, what are all those details? How will this all come and gel together to make sure, you know, doing a process like that, it really helps identify areas where, you know, more resources need to come to bear, more training, more just understanding of roles and responsibilities. So really the 4 bullets that I have here, you know, kind of the main points of what will take place is really, it's going to clarify tremendously during the exercise, what are those communication needs to partners and stakeholders that will be, you know, self-evident once we're faced with a Dracinid detection. Also, what are the, oh, sorry, you can go back for just a sec. What are those lines of responsibilities among the jurisdictions? And then exploring all kinds of potential decontamination strategies that may take place. And then finally, weighing all those options for potential mussel control. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, also part of this process too will be looking very closely and suggesting transition to containment ideas. So, you know, there will be short-term containment actions to be suggested. So that would be, as I mentioned, it could be a temporary closure of the water body just to get a handle on popping up mandatory decontamination strategies. But the long-term containment actions would probably be similar in that where can we put up strategically place decontamination stations to capture the most amount of watercraft and just be successful at that. The visual that you see here are just some samples of potential outreach materials that will be used to help make it really clear of what's going on at the lake and how people can be involved in help preventing spread outside of the lake. Next slide. So some of the things that we might see as potential actions that would be in the transition to containment that you could see in like sort of more of a long-term management situation would be that every single watercraft would need to be decontaminated. So just to make sure that there are no Dracinids that are moving anywhere out of Clear Lake. And then quarantine operations. There could be situations where all watercraft couldn't be decontaminated before they left, so these boats would want to be quarantined and clearly marked as such. Some containment protocols probably will be specifically targeted at some of the water-related events that Lisa also mentioned earlier. So if there are any fishing tournaments or the seaplane fly-in, those might need to be boosted up in terms of different decontamination protocols as well. And then finally, it would probably be very important to look at what kind of movement of boats are we seeing even now, but once you're in a situation where there are mussels in the water body, what are we seeing for boat movement away from there, and kind of working with nearby water bodies to communicate, well, we're seeing that most of our water body movement is going into these particular locations, and kind of flagging that for neighboring and partnering managers. So again, part of this project is to do a review of the county ordinances. And there is, so the bullets that are displayed here, you do have some existing regulatory language that, as you probably know, there's required screening of all trailered watercraft. There's stickers as proof of that screening for that launched watercraft. There's currently a ban on the disposal of live bait. And there's also a violation that comes with not complying with these guidelines here. So should there be an infestation of mussels, there likely, instead of a required screening, obviously that would flip to maybe potentially mandatory decontamination. So that could be something down the road. The sticker is really a great mechanism to kind of show solidarity and, generate some really needed funding to help do prevention that you already have in place. So there could be some variation that will be recommended as part of this project. But this is a great protections that you guys currently have in place. So a little bit about the timeline for this project, just to keep you guys apprised of how this is going. So the project was launched actually in December of 2022, and we've been working really closely with county staff and some state agency partners and others. And so that started with a launch of a website for the project that we're showing here briefly, and compiling information that was fed into the plan. So again, we've been working hard to create a draft response plan, and that's sort of an ongoing piece that we're continuing to refine with input on different aspects, and of course your county with Angela and other staff that are feeding into providing feedback and bolstering all the response pieces that are needed there. There will be a plan that's going to be posted to the website that you guys will have access to see that in the near future. So we're also concurrently planning the rapid response exercise, of course, that's taking place in June. And so developing, participant lists and agendas, et cetera. So once we get through that exercise, we'll really start bearing down in developing the containment and transition plan, and of course get feedback on that, but that will be finalized by the end of the summer. And then by September, the feasibility of and analysis for the decontamination stations will also be completed, and then close of the project will be this fall in November of 2023. So you can see progress and learn information about this entire project on the website. So go to www.clearlakemusselprevention.org. So we will be adding new information as things become available. But this is where you can see what's going on. There's quite a bit of information here, not only about the background of impacts from potential impacts from mussels, but then also about the project itself. So with that, if anybody has any questions about the project or next steps, mussels in general, we would be happy to entertain those for you guys.
Thank you so much for that. So we did have some questions. I got one before the meeting or before the webinar. So I'll have that, and I believe I have 2 or 3 from the chat. So, and I will, before we leave tonight, put back up the Clear Lake Mussel website and some other contact information too for me. So the first question was to clarify impacts for potential fishing, and both the angle that they wanted was ecological and then maybe the economic or recreation. So for fishing restrictions, kind of describe what that might look like. And I know you guys touched on it. So is there any more descriptives that we could add to that?
Well, in terms of fishing restrictions, a lot of times when the boats come onto the lake, they come in a fairly large number. A lot of them go out in a short period of time. A lot of that would have to be monitored, slowed down, potentially sent out in groups of boats versus just the normal way it's done. There's those types of things that just slow down access to the lake and slow down exit from the lake. Those are some of the restrictions that can happen. In terms of the ecological, we're still learning that across lakes in North America. A lot of people think that crystal clear water is the best thing that you can have, but a really productive lake is cloudy because everything is feeding off of everything else, and you've got a lot happening in the water column. So if it's a crystal clear lake, there's not a lot of life. That's why your drinking water is clear. You don't drink cloudy water, right? It's the same kind of concept.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I know that for the fishing tournament, some of our fishing tournaments can get, like, we've had tournaments where we get 1,000 boats, 1,200 boats at one time. And is it possible we won't maybe see restrictions of all of that, but restrictions in size? Like tournaments might be capped at like 500 participants or 200. Does that seem something that is seen elsewhere and might be a potential? Okay.
Yeah. There's been restrictions on the number of boats. There's been restrictions on places where those boats have been able to come from. So we're really trying to avoid all of that.
Yeah.
Well, and I have understood too, they have, popping up additional decon to do when you have a tournament coming in. I've heard of people like traveling to help do decon. So I don't know. I think it'd be a truly all hands on deck to, provide that kind of service at the lake.
Yeah. And at least currently the county, we don't have funds for those decons. So that cost would go to the boaters. They'd be paying to decon their own boats. So unless we figured out another way to pay for it. So, okay, I think that answers that question. Thank you guys. And then you kind of touched on the second question, which was the clear mussels doesn't clear water. Don't mussels, they're filter feeders. So don't they help make the water clear? Why we want clear water? And you touched on that because life is in the cloudiness of the water. Also here at Clear Lake, we have cyanobacteria during the summer. You guys touched on that, the algae blooms. And I know in lab studies that specifically mussels will eat only the good algae, the green algae, which is the fish food, and they'll actually expel the cyanobacteria. And so you're actually making more room for more cyanobacteria because their competitor is the green algae. And so it's kind of like this symbiotic relationship between the cyanobacteria and the mussels that they don't like the cyanobacteria, they're not going to eat it, but they're going to eat everything else that kind of competes with it in the water column.
Right, and that answers the next question, which is during drought years, that would be an exacerbated or worsened effect. You would see more significant harmful algal blooms in drought years because of that, if you had an infestation of quagga and zebra mussels.
Right. No, that's a good point. And we've had 3 years of pretty bad drought with really high blooms. And so, we'd see that increase with the mussels. And then part of that second question was, how does it relate to water intake lines? You guys can answer that or add to that, but anything that's in the water where there's mussels is going to get infested with mussels. And then the mussels are still there. Just because the water recedes doesn't mean the mussels go away. They die, but they're still stuck on there. And require that maintenance.
Right.
No. And then the follow-up question for that one was, how would mussels affect us during flood years? So the opposite of drought, when there's too much water and water's everywhere.
Yeah, so the biggest concern with flood years is what would happen to any water moving downstream or out of Clear Lake. That's usually the biggest concern. And so when we do these studies and we look at risk management, we're always looking miles and miles downstream of any water body. That's the biggest concern of all. In terms of the functioning of the lake itself, it wouldn't change much with higher water, but you'd want to be concerned about where that water is going because they will move. They'll move miles and miles and miles. They can live outside of water for weeks at a time at very high temperatures, at very low temperatures. They don't need to move in water to stay alive. They are a challenge.
Yeah, that's concerning for our neighboring county, south of us, Yellow County. The water comes out of Clear Lake, goes through Yellow County, and is sold for ag irrigation and some small drinking water systems and hydrological power. So that would be a concern with the water leaving Clear Lake for them. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. The other question we have, as a citizen, how can I help keep Clear Lake mussel free? And then we'll have one more question after that, and I think we'll wrap it up.
Leah, that's yours.
Well, yeah, I know. And, Lake County has done a great job too of pushing this idea of clean, drain, dry. And you can do that with any activity. So you don't have to have a giant motorboat. It could be any kind of equipment that is touching the water, and just making sure that you're doing that. But it is important too, if your friends aren't aware of this by any chance, like at this point, make sure that everybody does it. There's this, we're all sort of busy and things can be inconvenient, but just taking those few extra minutes to make sure things are clean always when you're recreating on the water is hugely helpful for not just this particular lake, but for every single lake. So you just kind of assume things are dirty, just clean it every time, and it's so simple. So,
and not just for mussels, but for other invasives.
For everything, absolutely, yeah.
Great. Okay, so one last question. If Clear Lake becomes infested with mussels, what might this mean for other small bodies of water? So they mentioned specifically Highland Springs. There is a dam that flows from Highland Springs and flows downstream into Clear Lake, and sometimes that stream dries in the summer. But maybe like that's an area that dam creates a reservoir, it's a recreation area, but can mussels go upstream? Like would that, if they're connected, I know for our purposes, for our prevention, any connecting water we consider infested, even if we don't find mussels there, because there's a chance the connectivity of the water environment. But what would be the feasibility of that reservoir getting the mussels there?
So we don't have a lot of examples in North America of mussels moving upstream. We do have examples of mussels moving, you could say in some sense upstream if there's a flood type situation where the distance, let's just say for sake of argument that there is a water body not a half a mile north of Clear Lake, and during flood type situations the two could potentially connect. If there's not a lot of moving or running water, there is the chance that they could get out of Clear Lake. I think the biggest message we have, and it's one of the reasons we did the reciprocity study several years ago in Lake County, is we want everybody concerned about every water body in Lake County. We want the Berryessa folks, we want Pillsbury, we want Sonoma, we want everybody thinking about this, doing a good prevention program, talking with one another. It really has to be a synchronized type deal, because we're talking about Clear Lake, but they could be introduced to Lake Berryessa, they could be introduced to Highland Lake or Highland Springs, and you could end up with them in Clear Lake as a result. So we really have to be looking beyond the footprint of Clear Lake for this program to be effective.
Right, and I guess I would add to that too, right, there is sort of that bigger picture management situation. So once a new water body becomes infested, it sort of goes out in concentric circles of concern. So there's some of those nearby smaller water bodies, but then once we bump it out, like other states might be going, wow, we've got this large water body. It sort of becomes a flag of concern for boats that maybe left this water body coming to them. So, other managers elsewhere can react accordingly and say, oh, we've got to take, different measures because this boat has come from Clear Lake. So,
so we're looking at like a regional ripple effect here.
It's a total regional ripple effect.
Right.
Yes.
Or if another lake near us gets them, where it'd be the same.
Absolutely.
Yes. Right.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I think that's a great point to leave it on. Kind of gloom and doom, but we're doing things proactive by today.
No, we're being proactive. It's all good.
Yeah, we really appreciate you guys talking about this. I am going to share my screen for a few more slides to just bring on home that if anybody wants to get involved or learn more, this is the website. We will have the recording of, there is a recording of the previous webinar that we did, I believe, on there. But please check out this website, clearlakemusselprevention.org. And then as we go through the plan and develop the plan, we'll be posting information there. And there will be reviews when the plan is draft form for public input. So we really encourage everybody to check that out. Be involved. This community impacts the community. We want to make sure the community is involved to best design the response. And if you have any feedback for us, how we did, how we can be better, how we can improve upon, please let us know. I did put the evaluation link in the comments on Facebook and in the chat on Zoom. And if you have any questions, you can contact me here. You can do a screenshot and I can answer any questions about this. Also, we are looking for future Water Quality Wednesday topics, what you want to hear about, what's important to you about the lake. And we have those. We try to do 4 a year every 3 months or so. We can always do more, but I just, I want to know what you guys care about so I can make it happen. So let me know. You can email us at water.resources@lakecountyca.gov. You can also follow us on Facebook and leave a message there at Lake County Water. And then lastly, we have an event coming up. If you want to help clean up some of Lake County, we have the Clean California Community Day, March 25th. And we have locations in Kelseyville, Pioneer Mini Park, that's downtown Kelseyville, and then Highland Springs Recreation Area in the park proper there. So we have places where you can go. Everything will be provided for you from 9 to 12. You can check in. You can come at any time. Put in half an hour, go for a hike, go for a coffee, do some cleanup. And this will really help beautify Lake County for that today. So I think that's it. If you have any further questions, also, if you think you see a mussel, contact me, Angela, at Water Resources. You can call us at 707-263-2344. Even if you don't know it's a mussel, but you're not sure, I'd much rather go out and look at a beach or a dock or some structure that's in the water that doesn't have mussels and confirm that. So you can always call me anytime. I go out there several times a year to respond to folks. So we just want to make sure we're keeping mussels out of Clear Lake. And I really thank our speakers, Leah and Lisa. Thank you so much. Thank you to the tech team, Sam and Matthew, today. I hope everybody has a good evening. And again, let us know if you have any questions. Thank you for joining us on Water Quality Wednesday.